arrived in Nairobi in November 1979, and I spent December looking for somewhere to live and that sort of thing, just getting myself to know. And then Ed Kimball, who was the boss of the whole world at that point for the work with the children. The first place I was allotted to was Indonesia. And he was then the Asian boss. And he lived in Singapore with his wife and children. So I saw a lot of them and met them. And I went to Indonesia in 10 years before that. The reason I was asked to go, there was an office there, and there was children, and there was, but the office, there were two men who were older than me and two ladies who were younger than me, and they said they were fed up of being asked for bribes. You see, because they're Christians. So they said, please bring us in a foreigner. That's why I went. So I had a nice time there. I was there nearly 5 years. Compassion sent me up to Korea. That was the first big place they worked, where they started the work, and said for a few weeks, then we'll decide what we're going to do for you. So I was up there for a few weeks, and then I bugged them again and asked them, because I didn't want to stay there particularly. It's just a big city, you know. So they looked and they realized that they had started work in Haiti, but somebody was commuting from the office in the States, which was then in Chicago. And so they needed to have somebody come and set up an office and start the work with what they'd started and continue. So that's where I went then. And then after I was there 5 years, Compassion wanted to start work in Africa. And Ed Kimball, who was now the boss of the whole world, he had been living in Singapore, he asked me if I'd please do that. So he came in January 1980, and we had got in touch with various people. Look, for instance, he was in touch very well with the Salvation Army around the world. You see, he'd had this experience. So, I mean, we went to Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi then, and started and got with it. Then, sometime later that same year, we got into Zaire. Well, they called it Zaire then. Now it's, Democratic Republic of Congo. And we got in two places. One was down on the Lake Tanganyika there, and one was up at Bunia. They were completely different, but we had contacts there. See, so we started work there as well in the first few years. When I started going to Indonesia, I had no idea how it was going to end up as it did. But I mean, it was just great. I mean, it was wonderful. Well, I can see it was a very great thing to do, to have these children. For instance, in Haiti, I was just looking yesterday at a picture of myself, which was in one of the Compassion things. And I was getting off a boat because I went from Haiti, that's an island, right, to a smaller island to register some children one day. And they wrote on the thing that it was the first time a white woman had been to that little island where I went. And one of the children I registered had orange hair. You know what? That means they haven't eaten properly. So I was so grateful because one of the things we did in those days was a lunch program. I mean, that's one of the things. So when I went back 6 months later, this child had black hair. You see, so that it was really to help some of these children who didn't have a life, really. You feel privileged being in that situation of helping these kids because they have a much better chance of life. And why it's really hurting me about Haiti now. You can imagine that. You see, for instance, in the last few years, I've been seeing that people have been leaving Haiti. And I thought to myself, they never left there when I was there. What a shame they have to do that now. I was in Rome working at the FAO. I thought it was, one day when I was in the corridors, I bumped into a chap who I used to work with in London. And he said he was now at Washington, D.C. at the World Bank, one of the international finance corporations. Would I like to come and work with him? But while I was in Rome, I went to the British Embassy Church because it was in English. I didn't know Italian, and of course I didn't need to learn Italian because I was working for the FAO. And one day in the middle of the sermon is when I gave my life to the Lord. And I didn't have anybody to talk to or help me or anything, but I did it. One day I was in the YWCA doing stuff there, just, exercising and stuff. And there was a brochure on the desk. There was only one copy left. It was from an organization called the Christian Service Corps, which said, not everybody can give their whole life to the Lord, but perhaps they can give 2 years. And the office was in DC, it was right there. So I went to see them, and they interviewed me. And they explained that I told them I couldn't possibly raise support. That was the problem. You know how they have to raise, because here I'd only been here 6 months. But it was true, but it was also a cop-out. I was thinking at this point that I was getting into something too deep I couldn't do. So they said, okay, and you can imagine, because we didn't have the communications in those days, some Compassion was in Chicago. It took a few days to all this come back. So they told Compassion that she couldn't raise her own support, because they had obviously been in touch with her. And so that's why they asked me if I'd like to go to work with Compassion, you see. First of all, they said, would I like to go to Korea? Now, I had traveled in the Asia, and I knew Korea was just a boring big city. I really didn't want to go to Korea, but I felt the Lord telling me, say yes. So I said yes. And then when he got information back from the Chicago office, they said, this is a few days later now, you see, they said, we've actually found someone for Korea, but would she like to go to Indonesia? So you see, having said I'd go, the Lord gave me what I really had preferred. And it was, when I learned why I was going there, it was really nice. I mean, we enjoyed working with them. They'd started the work, We traveled a lot, all around Indonesia. At that point, the staff were happier, they said, to take over than they had before. So that was okay. The whole program is different for the children I'm talking about now, than it used to be. It sounds like it's probably really different. Well, you see, we were working with churches. I took all the pictures, by the way, in those days, and nothing was like it is now, I'm sure. And filling in the forms for the children. In Haiti, I spoke French in school, not very well, but I mean, I managed. In Indonesia, I learned Indonesian. I learned it for about 3 months before I left even to go there. So but as far as I can remember, I didn't have any trouble communicating with the staff there. So. And here in Kenya, when I came, somebody had told me about the Anglican guest house. Next door, they had a second building where they had classes of Swahili. So I started, probably in January. I mean, it was a school term thing, And when it got to about June, I realized that I was not even there half the time. And so I had to give up. I mean, I was on traveling so much, you see. I went and did all the pictures. Sometimes people helped me with the forms as well, or other people who could fill in the applications type thing. But it was great. I mean, it was great. And so I was in charge of the pictures, and we sent the forms and the pictures by post to the headquarters. You see, there was no email or anything like that then. So everything was by mail, parcels, Well, that must have been Salvation Army, because the number for Julius was 100, as I remember, in his project. So it must have been. And Ed Kimball, the boss for the whole world, he had a big relationship, obviously, around the world with Salvation Army. But But then you see, we had other people, of course, Anglicans we got involved with, and Baptists in Uganda and so on, and here as well. I mean, it was great. The whole thing was great. What happened with Julius was, somewhere along the way, his sponsor left, and his name was not on the list or something. And I was still new enough that I didn't understand why that had happened. So I just decided to help him whenever I could. And so when he left school, I think he did an accounting course or something, and I helped him with that, I remember. So we, continued the connection. Well, of course, I think it was when I met Julius. I mean, I can remember going there to register, I think. And then sometime later when his sponsor quit, and I was new enough that I didn't know what to do about that. I mean, obviously later I could have communicated and so on, but you see, communication was difficult because you didn't have anything like the things you have now, computers and all that. You see, we had nothing. I think it's great that you're continuing, because the need will always be there, isn't it, for people? I mean, when they don't have a chance to grow up as a normal person without help, I mean, that's, so to me, whatever they do, it's going to be helpful and is necessary too. And these are people who are Christians too, of course, so that's very important, yeah. By the time I retired, I had been here so long, I mean, church, friends, all that, everything. So I just chose that. Actually, I had 3 choices. Compassion even said this to me when I was giving in my notice. And they said, you can either, we realized that you will either go to UK or come to the US or stay in Kenya. And so I told them, stay in Kenya. So then they gave me what they were going to do when I left. I mean, how they're going to organize it with that idea in mind. In fact, I'm living in the house of the chap who became the first African senior pastor, Musimi, and his wife Nyambura. I got to know them quite well because they lived when he was the senior pastor, they lived in the house on that road, what was called, I forget, the church house, the current community church. He was there with his wife and 2 small children who are now in their 30s. And there were 2 houses, so I was renting this other one. And so I lived with them for a while. And then he left, and so I had to look for somewhere else. But we kind of kept in touch the whole time.